A human enters Dragon Academy, and every young dragon rushes toward her. The Imperial Academy of Draconus rose out of the black stone like a fortress carved from a dead star, its jagged towers cutting into a crimson sky veined with heat storms. To most visitors, the academy looked like a temple of war. To Lauren Hayes, it looked like a test the galaxy didn't expect her pass. She stood before the colossal gates, her human body looking painfully small against architecture designed for beings twice her size. Gravity pressed down on her with just enough extra weight to feel wrong, like she was wearing an invisible rucksack she couldn't take off. The air tasted of metal, sulfur, and faint ozone. The sharp, chemical breath of Draconus Prime, homeworld of the most feared warriors in known space. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. She exhaled slowly, forcing her shoulders to settle into a steady, military straight posture. Her environmental suit whispered as she adjusted the seals at her neck. Sleek, dark, and close-fitting, it was engineered on Earth for high-heat, high-gravity operations, with a cooling mesh and a thin impact gel layer beneath the outer weave. It wasn't true armor, not by Draconian standards, but it gave her enough protection to compete without dropping in the first hour. Around her, Draconians moved across the wide plaza, like living statues brought to life. They were tall, many over 8 feet, broad-shouldered, bipedal, their bodies layered with natural scales and burnished copper, obsidian black, tarnished silver, and deep bronze. Horn ridges, frilled crests, and facial markings varied from bloodline to bloodline, but they all had the same obvious traits: strength, confidence, and a knowledge that their species had dominated the galactic arm for over 3,000 years. Humans had only been in interstellar space for a few decades. They were tolerated as traders, miners, diplomats, and occasionally as clever technicians, but never as warriors on the same level as the Dragon Corps. That was the unspoken rule. That rule had cracked on a frontier rock called New Appalachia. 6 standard months earlier, the Vrex hive had awakened from centuries of dormancy in deep space. They fell on the human mining colony like a living storm. Chitinous bodies, bladed limbs, hive-linked minds whose only logic was expansion and consumption. The Imperial fleet was several days away when the first Vrex spores hit atmosphere. By all official predictions, New Appalachia should have been wiped off every star chart within hours. Instead, the miners had refused to die on schedule. Led by a former Earth Special Forces officer named Tyler Grant, they ripped apart their mining rigs and turned them into weapons. Sonic drills were modified into vibration cannons that scrambled hive coordination in localized zones. Explosives meant for rock were rewired into decoy charges that faked out the Vrex's thermal senses. They ran cables through tunnels as trip lines, set up unstable rock falls, and fought like people who knew no one was coming. For 9 brutal days and nights, the colony held. On day 3, a Draconian diplomatic vessel, crippled in the first wave of Vrex attacks, limped into the same system and nearly died there. Its distress beacon drew part of the hive toward it, and what should have been a final, hopeless stand turned into the moment that changed Imperial opinion of humans forever. High Commander Thorn, the most decorated Draconian warrior in 3 generations, had been aboard that ship. From a battered observation deck and hastily relinked sensor feeds, he watched humans improvise, adapt, and survive in ways that made no tactical sense to a Draconian mind, and yet worked. Whereas people favored disciplined formation and perfect doctrine, the humans leaned into chaos, traps, and unorthodox tactics that slipped through the hive's pattern recognition like sand through claws. When the Imperial fleet finally arrived, the hive cluster was shattered, the colony still stood, and the Draconian vessel had survived because humans had refused to die quietly. Thorn invoked a rarely used clause in Imperial law, the right of exceptional merit. Any species that demonstrated extraordinary valor in defense of the Empire could send a single representative to train at the Imperial Academy. No one believed the Emperor would accept, but the Emperor had seen the same after-action footage. He approved, and that's how Lauren Hayes, 26, former Earth Special Tactics operator, new Appalachia veteran and one of its primary tactical analysts, ended up standing at the gates of the Dragon Corps' most sacred institution, the first human ever admitted for full warrior training. Not as a mascot, not as a guest, as a candidate. The gates shuddered, splitting open with the grinding roar of ancient machinery. Every Draconian within sight turned to look. Their eyes followed her, vertical pupils set in reptilian irises, some molten gold, some slate gray, some electric blue. Their expressions were hard for her to read, but the briefing files had been blunt. Most Draconians expected her to fail. Many believed she shouldn't have been allowed through the atmosphere, let alone the academy gates. Fear wanted to creep into her shoulders, her jaw, her stride. Lauren smothered it. She kept her gaze forward and her back straight, walking with a deliberate, contained confidence. Too submissive would confirm their contempt. Too aggressive would look like a challenge. She threaded the narrow path between. Inside, the main courtyard opened like a basin of polished black stone. Hundreds of young Draconians moved through synchronized combat drills, their heavy training staves, cars, whirling and striking with lethal precision. Every blow cracked the still air with the sound of stone being hammered into dust. Heat rolled off the dark ground in shimmering waves. At the far end stood a cluster of older Draconians in formal armor, scales dulled but heavily marked, metals etched directly into their bodies. One of them stepped forward, a massive male whose charcoal scales were traced with crimson patterns like dried lava. Lauren recognized High Commander Thorn from the tactical briefings and the debrief sessions she had watched until her eyes burned. The drill slowed, then stopped altogether as the trainees noticed her. Silence descended. The only sound was the soft hiss of her suit's cooling system and the distant hum of generators. Lauren stopped at the distance that had been drilled into her during cultural training, close enough to show respect, not so close as to intrude. She executed the exact form of the Imperial salute, right fist across the chest, left hand clasped behind the back, chin lowered. Thorn studied her for several long breaths. Then, in a move that sent a ripple of shock across the courtyard, he returned the salute with flawless precision. When he spoke, his voice sounded like distant boulders grinding together, the translator in Lauren's ears smoothing it into English a heartbeat later. Lauren Hayes of Earth, he rumbled, you stand where no human has stood. The path before you will test the limits of your species' capabilities. Many here believe you will fail within days. Others believe you should never have been permitted to attempt this at all. The weight of hundreds of stairs pressed between her shoulder blades. She didn't flinch. What do you believe, High Commander? She asked, voice steady. A low, thunder-like hum vibrated in his chest, a contemplative sound, according to her files. I believe, Thorn said at last, that underestimating any species is a dangerous mistake. I have witnessed humans accomplish the impossible by methods Draconians would never consider. Whether such methods will serve you here remains to be proven. He turned to address the gathered academy. The human Lauren Hayes will undergo the full Imperial training regimen, he announced, voice echoing off the stone. No modifications, no special accommodations. She will be judged by the same standards, bound by the same discipline, and face the same consequences for failure as any Draconian initiate. Murmurs rippled through the ranks, startled, disapproving, incredulous. Draconian training was calibrated for bodies that could shrug off heat that would cook human organs, march for weeks without water, and take projectile impacts on natural armor. To put a human through that without adjustment sounded less like an honor and more like a prolonged execution. If that is your command, High Commander, Lauren said, then I accept the terms. His eyes narrowed. It is not my command, he corrected. It was your request, delivered by your diplomatic corps. Did you fail to understand what you asked for, human? She allowed herself the barest ghost of a smile. Understood perfectly, Lauren replied. I requested no special treatment, because I require none. A faint ripple traveled down the ridged plates of Thorn's neck. Amusement, maybe. Bold words, he said. We shall see if your actions echo them. He gestured to a silver-scaled female standing nearby, her armor marked with blue. Master Sergeant Saren will be your primary instructor. You will treat her commands as if they come from the Emperor. Saren stepped forward, movements precise, economy in every gesture. Her eyes flicked over Lauren like a scanner readout. Report to Barracks 8, Saren said, her translated voice clipped and crisp. First training begins at dawn. Assemble in the yard. Do not be late. The formation broke apart on her command, the trainees returning to their drills, stealing sidelong glances at the human who had dared to stand in their courtyard like an equal. Thorn left without another word. Saren turned and walked, expecting Lauren to follow. Your quarters are standard issue, Saren said as they crossed the courtyard, heat rising in waves around them. If atmospheric conditions prove unsuitable, they'll be suitable. Lauren cut in, not aggressively, but firmly. Saren's head tilted, a small, sharp movement. Your environmental suit will be forbidden during most training, she warned. Ambient temperature averages 120 degrees on your Fahrenheit scale. Training arenas often exceed that. Gravity is approximately 1.3 times Earth standard. Our regimen assumes full functionality under these conditions for extended periods. I've been training in gravity sims for 6 months, Lauren answered. We've run heat drills under Desert Plus conditions. Humans are adaptable. Not that adaptable, Saren said flatly. 1/3 of our initiates fail the program, despite being evolved for this world. If you are here as a political mascot, you endanger yourself and distract my warriors. I'm a soldier, Lauren replied, not a politician. I was selected because someone believes I have the best chance of succeeding. Judge me by performance. Nothing else. Saren watched her for several seconds, expression unreadable. We shall see, she said finally. They entered a long barracks block of the same black stone, its interior spare and utilitarian. Saren led her to a small room, a narrow sleeping platform, a storage locker, a sanitation unit, and a newly installed environmental control panel blinking against one wall. This allows you to lower temperature to survivable levels during sleep and rest cycles only, Saren said. At all other times, you will endure the same conditions as every trainee. Morning bell sounded what you would call 0500. You will have 10 minutes to reach the assembly yard, prepared for physical conditioning. Any questions? Lauren thought carefully. Just one, she said. What is your assessment of the Vrex threat? The official reports we receive on Earth are limited. For the first time, Saren's posture shifted in a way Lauren didn't need cultural notes to understand. This topic mattered. The Vrex are more dangerous than your governments realize, Saren said quietly. The attack on your mining colony was not random. They are probing, measuring response times, testing doctrine. We believe a major offensive is coming. Against draconian space, human space, all space. The Vrex do not see allies or partners, only biomass, hosts, and obstacles. Lauren absorbed that. Then what happens here matters, she said. If I succeed, it's not just a symbol. Perhaps, Saren replied, though what one human can contribute remains questionable. One human can contribute ideas, Lauren said evenly. Different perspectives. New strategies. If your traditional doctrine was enough, the Vrex wouldn't be advancing at all. Saren's eyes narrowed. She didn't answer that. Rest while you can, she said instead. Tomorrow will test your confidence. The door slid shut behind her. Lauren sat on the edge of the sleeping platform and unsealed her helmet, breathing the draconian air for the first time without filtration. It was hot and slightly sulfurous, the oxygen content just within her comfort zone. Her lungs burned a little. Her suit's internal readings flashed yellow before settling back toward green. She opened a small compartment in her pack and tapped a compact hollow projector. A miniature scene shimmered into existence above her palm. Humans in mining gear, dusty and exhausted, but smiling in a way only survivors do. At the center stood Tyler Grant. She'd never met him, but she knew every decision he'd logged on New Appalachia. She'd studied the colony's battle like scripture. They had survived because they did not think like their enemy, because they didn't think like Draconians either. This, she reminded herself, is why I'm here. Not to outmuscle a species built like walking tanks, but to prove that different doesn't mean weaker. She lowered the room temperature to something closer to an Earth desert night and spent an hour stretching, running high-gravity acclimation drills, and mentally rehearsing draconian forms. Only then did she allow herself to lie down and trigger the internal alarm discipline had burned into her during Special Forces training. Dawn on Draconus Prime wasn't gentle. Crimson light slammed through the narrow window, painting the walls in blood tones. The bell reverberated through stone and bone alike. Lauren was already awake, heart rate steady, suit sealed. She left the helmet off, choosing to breathe local air. Her suit's cooling mesh whirred softly as it tried to stay ahead of the rising temperature. In the corridor, ranks of Draconian trainees were already moving with silent precision toward the yard. They towered over her, scales catching the red light, their cars slung across their backs. Some didn't bother to hide their curiosity now that she was officially part of their world, for however long she lasted. She fell in at the end of a row, matching their marching cadence exactly. Master Sergeant Saren's voice cut across the yard as the formation assembled. Today begins Cycle 3 of Basic Combat Training, she called. Those who have survived Cycles 1 and 2 have earned the right to continue. Those who join us now, her gaze flicked briefly to Lauren, have yet to prove that they belong within these walls. A group of instructors stepped forward, each carrying a staff of dark metal. The car, the first weapon of every Draconian warrior. Before energy blades, before plasma glands, before ship command systems, there was the car. Simple, heavy, unrelenting. The car is our oldest weapon, Saren said. For 3 millennia, its design has remained unchanged. Through it, we teach strength, precision, and discipline. Until you master it, you're not worthy to hold anything more advanced. The instructors moved through the ranks, handing out the weapons. When one reached Lauren, he hesitated for half a second, then offered the staff with the same formal gesture he used for every other trainee. The car was almost as tall as she was, and far heavier than it looked. Forged from a dense alloy her suit couldn't immediately identify. In Draconus Prime's gravity, it thudded into her palms with enough weight to drag her shoulders down. She adjusted her grip, letting her body sink slightly at the knees to counterbalance. Form ranks by assigned cadre, Saren ordered. The trainees shifted smoothly into smaller groupings. Lauren's HUD pinged as her room assignment synced with her training unit. Saren approached. You will join training Cadre 5, she said. Instructor Razik will oversee your forms. You will obey his orders. Lauren moved toward Cadre 5, feeling 20 pairs of draconian eyes follow the approach of the human who threatened their neat hierarchy just by existing in their formation. Instructor Razik waited at the front. Bronze-scaled, shoulders like a bulkhead, his body was marked with the black ink patterns of a veteran who had earned every line. His gaze landed on Lauren and held, weighing her like a piece of unfamiliar equipment. The car is not a tool, Razik said to the cadre. It is an extension of the warrior's body. It must respond as naturally as your own limbs. We begin with stance of readiness. He slid into position, feet planted, weight balanced, staff at a diagonal, guarding his center while ready to strike. The rest of the cadre mirrored him with varying levels of skill. Lauren followed, studying the stance she'd memorized from training files and shadow practiced 100 times in simulation. It wasn't built for human joints. Her hips and shoulders aligned differently. She made micro-adjustments. Angle of the back foot, placement of the hands, shift of center of mass, to preserve the stance's purpose without tearing her own ligaments. Razik stalked through the line, correcting wrists here, elbow angles there, pushing knees into deeper bends. When he reached Lauren, he stopped dead. Your proportions are wrong, he said. I've adapted the stance for human anatomy, Lauren replied, keeping her voice neutral. The core principle is intact. Explain the principle, Razik demanded. Why does this stance exist? It provides maximum stability and allows immediate transition into offense or defense, Lauren answered. The diagonal car line shields vital zones while leaving multiple strike vectors open with minimal repositioning. He regarded her for another second, then gave a short grunt. Correct, he admitted. Defensive position 1. Now, the cadre shifted. Lauren raised the car into a vertical guard in front of her body, angling it slightly to deflect force rather than eat it full on. Razik circled behind her, studying the adaptation. Inadequate leverage, he said. A full strike would rip that staff from your hands. For a Draconian opponent, using Draconian mechanics, yes, Lauren said. Human combat doctrine doesn't try to contest raw strength directly when we're outclassed. We adapt to the opponent. Demonstrate, Razik said at once. Strike at me, Lauren answered. His eyes flickered at the audacity, but he slid into an offensive stance, car humming through the air as he brought it around in a controlled sweep aimed at her midsection. Even controlled, the strike carried enough momentum to break ribs if she mistimed it. Instead of meeting force with force, Lauren pivoted, let the blow pass through the space she'd just occupied, and redirected a fraction of its energy with a glancing parry rather than a hard block. She let his momentum pull him a step farther than he'd meant to move, then snapped her own car toward the opening at his side. He easily blocked the counter. It would have been suicidal to assume anything else, but his eyes sharpened. Interesting, he said. You sacrifice power for mobility. I use what I have, Lauren replied. Humans can't match your strength or armor, so we have to excel at other things. Razik turned back to the cadre. The human demonstrates an important principle, he said loudly. Know your strengths and your limits. Fight within reality, not ego. Again, readiness stance. The drills continued. Hour after hour, under a harsh red sun and climbing temperatures, Lauren swung, blocked, stepped, balanced on black stone that seemed to radiate heat from the planet's core. Some forms demanded brute force she simply didn't have. She compensated with angle, timing, and accuracy, letting technique carry what muscle could not. By mid-morning, the heat inside her suit approached critical. Grav stress gnawed at her calves and lower back. Each breath felt a fraction heavier than the last. The Draconian trainees around her barely seemed winded. When Razik shifted them onto rising and falling platforms, unstable terrain designed to punish anyone who relaxed their balance for even a heartbeat, Lauren dug into muscle memory and stubbornness. She leapt, landed, adjusted, staff always ready, until one platform dropped unexpectedly as she stepped onto it. Her foot landed half-twisted on the uneven surface. Pain flared along her ankle, sharp and hot. She caught herself before falling, biting back a curse, forcing her weight to distribute before the joint gave way completely. Human, Razik barked. Your form deteriorates. Precision is not optional. I'll correct it, instructor, Lauren answered, voice strained but even. See that you do. She finished the exercise with careful adjustments, protecting the injured ankle without letting it show more than necessary. By the time Razik finally called a break, the joint throbbed, her muscles shook, and her suit was drenched. The Draconians moved toward mineral fountains, drinking the thick, shimmering fluid that passed for their ideal hydration. Lauren took measured sips from her water reservoir, conserving what she had. One trainee broke away from her group and approached. She was slightly shorter than most, scales of rare pale gold that caught the light like polished metal. Your technique is unorthodox. The translator rendered her words, feminine and cool. Necessary for humans to stay in one piece, Lauren replied, managing a faint smile. The Draconian made a small gesture Lauren recognized as acknowledgement. I am Kira, third daughter of House Solaran, she said. Lauren Hayes, Earth Special Tactics, Lauren answered, returning the correct gesture. Your presence here is irregular, Kira said. Many say it is a political performance that insults the Academy's traditions. And what do you say? Lauren asked. Kira tilted her head, considering. I say understanding potential allies, or potential threats, has value, she answered. The Empire has grown comfortable with its own dominance. Comfort dulls the edge of vigilance. Before Lauren could respond, Razik's voice cracked across the arena, calling them back into formation. The afternoon drills piled more demands onto already screaming muscles. The unstable platforms grew higher, the transitions faster, the heat worse. By the time the sun had started its slow slide toward evening, Lauren's ankle was swollen inside her boot, sending bright flashes of pain up her leg every time she planted it. When dismissal finally came, she limped back to her quarters, waited until the door sealed, then stripped off her suit and examined the damage. The joint was puffy and discolored, a sprain, not a break, but bad enough to cripple her performance if she did nothing. Her standard human medkit could stabilize it, but not repair it fast enough. Not for what tomorrow would demand. Here is words from earlier resurfaced. There is one who might assist you. Archivist Xander. His methods are unorthodox. His knowledge of other species is extensive. Lauren bound the ankle firmly, resealed her suit, and headed into the eastern wing of the academy. The corridors there were older, the architecture more elaborate, evidence of centuries of redesign layered over original stone. She followed, wayfinding glyphs her translator converted into simple path markers until she found a door labeled with complex sigils related to biological research. She tapped the signal. Silence. Just as she was about to turn away, the door slid open. The laboratory beyond looked like chaos had been given funding and a time limit. Tanks of preserved organisms, stacks of physical texts, flickering hollow displays, disassembled devices, specimen jars. It was a cluttered shrine to curiosity. At its center stood a Draconian unlike any Lorne had seen. Tall but slender, with almost translucent white scales and eyes of electric blue that seemed far too bright. Instead of armor, he wore layered academic robes threaded with cables and sensor nodes. A human, he said, voice higher and more melodic than most Draconians. In my lab. Excellent. Come in. Quickly. Lauren stepped inside, navigating between equipment with care. I'm Lauren Hayes, she began. I was told you might have an interest in you? Yes. He cut in, circling her with frankly delighted curiosity. High Commander Thorne's human initiate. New Appalachia analyst. Subject of at least 4 shouting matches in the faculty forum. And you're injured. Left ankle. Training accident. Platforms, I presume. She blinked. Yes, she said. How did you? Weight distribution. Micro hesitation before you shift. Incomplete roll through the joint. Obvious, he said, waving a clawed hand. Sit before you worsen it. He swept a pile of data slates off a table with zero concern for their landing and gestured sharply. Lauren sat, still wary but out of options. I was told you study non-Draconian biology, she said. I need to understand how to survive a regimen built for people who can walk through plasma storms. I don't need special treatment. I need smarter strategies. Oh, good, he said, activating a compact scanning device that hummed to life. You're not delusional. He ran the scanner over her ankle, studied the readout with keen interest. Grade 2 sprain, standard soft tissue damage, minor vascular stress, he murmured. Human baseline. Easy. I have a device used on hatchlings. I'll adjust the output. Your tissue density is lower, nerve sensitivity higher, but healing patterns are similar enough. He fetched a small unit, adjusted settings with quick, deft movements, and fixed it around her ankle. Warmth spread through the injured tissue, easing the worst of the pain. 6 hours should restore roughly 80% function, he said. You'll still feel it, but you won't be crippled. More importantly, you won't overcompensate and ruin something else. Thank you, Lauren said. But I need more than patch jobs. I need ways to stop this from happening constantly while still meeting your standards. He stilled, head tilting in that familiar Draconian gesture, but on him it looked almost bird-like. You wish to succeed in an environment that biology says should break you, he said slowly. Fascinating. He snapped his fingers and a hollow display bloomed in the air, showing a rotating overlay of Draconian and human musculature, skeleton, and neural pathways. Here, he said, Draconian combat forms optimized for brute power, durability, and thermal resilience. Humans lack in these areas. However, fine motor control, pattern recognition, adaptability, and stress response neurochemistry are all markedly in your favor. So, I shouldn't try to move like a draconian, Lauren said. I should try to move like a highly optimized human using draconian principles. His eyes brightened. Exactly, he said. You cannot be a lesser dragon and win. You must be the best possible human. For the next hour, he walked her through adjustments, how to shorten certain swings to keep joints safe under higher gravity, how to use micro steps instead of long lunges, how to redirect force instead of absorbing it. He rewrote the logic of the forms in her mind without changing their core goals. Before she left, he flipped to another set of images. Draconian juveniles, smaller and brighter scaled. One more thing, Xander said. Our offspring, cubs, go through a phase of intense curiosity before hierarchical conditioning sets fully. They are far more open to novelty than adults. That sounds nice, Lauren said cautiously. But why tell me? Because tomorrow a cub cohort from the central nursery will observe training as part of their education, Xander said, something like amusement sparking in his eyes. They will see you. Their reaction will be informative. Lauren filed that away with everything else she needed to process. As she left the lab, healing unit humming quietly around her ankle, she felt the day's weight settle over her like the gravity itself. She had survived day one. Barely. Back in her quarters, she adjusted the room to a cooler temperature, checked the healing device's progress, and lay down, eyes closed, mind replaying altered combat forms over and over. Outside, the academy pulsed like a living thing, ancient, proud, rigid. Tomorrow, Lauren would step into its heart again, and somewhere, in a central nursery full of dragon cubs, curiosity was already waking up. If you're still here at the end of part 1, let me know in the comments which character you like so far. Lauren, Thorn, Saren, Kira, or the strange archivist Xander. Hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next parts of this sci-fi Dragon Academy story, where humans, dragons, and the Vrex Hive all collide in ways nobody expects. Dawn was a hard-edged blade on Draconus Prime. It didn't so much rise as burn its way over the jagged horizon, flooding the Academy's obsidian courtyards with crimson light that shimmered across the black stone like liquid fire. Lauren Hayes was already awake, sitting upright on the edge of her bunk with her ankle wrapped in the humming bracer Xander had calibrated the night before. The warmth of the healing field pulsed against her skin, steady, soothing, and leagues better than the ice pack she'd used during human military training. Her suit beeped a warning. Environmental heat. Risk zone commencing soon. Yeah, I know, she muttered and sealed the last seam of her suit. The cooling mesh kicked up to full, whispering around her like someone exhaling across cold metal. The morning bell hit next, deep, resonant, vibrating every molecule of the room. Lauren winced. Draconians didn't understand the concept of subtlety, she thought, slinging her car across her back. The staff was awkward and heavy, but the adjusted stance Xander had helped her refine made the weight more manageable. When she stepped into the corridor, she found it already packed with Draconian trainees flowing toward the assembly yard in coordinated formation. Their feet were almost silent despite the mass of them, claws clicking softly, tails occasionally swaying to counterbalance. Lauren moved into step behind them, careful not to fall out of rhythm. More trainees turned to look at her than they had yesterday, not with open mockery or hostility, but with curiosity that wasn't entirely hostile. News traveled fast here, maybe too fast. As the group filed into the main yard, the heat rising off the black stone struck her like a wall, and her cooling gels spiked to compensate. Her ankle twinged, less pain than yesterday, but still a reminder that she existed in a place where one misstep could ruin her. Master Sergeant Saren appeared at the front of the yard, crisp as an obsidian carving, eyes sweeping across the formation. Cycle 3 continues, she announced. Today's focus, adaptive combat under variable terrain. Lauren felt her pulse quicken. That was exactly the kind of training where she might hold her own, if she could keep her ankle stable and her brain sharper than the pain. Before the session begins, Saren continued, you will be informed of an observational component. She paused. Trainees straightened. The Central Nursery has sent a cub cohort to witness today's exercises. Lauren blinked. Cubs, Xander had warned her. She scanned the far side of the yard and saw them. A cluster of small draconians crowding behind a transparent barrier, their scales blazing with iridescent colors. They were 4 to 5 feet tall, eyes rounder, horns smaller, postures looser. They bounced on their claws in a barely contained explosion of energy. A few had already noticed her. Tiny claws tapped excitedly on the barrier. Great. No pressure. Saren gestured sharply. Move to the adaptive arena. The group marched toward a sprawling training zone filled with shifting platforms, wind generators, unstable stone beams, and pits covered by holographic hazard projections. Lauren's ankle protested as she jogged across uneven stone, but she pushed the sensation aside. Razik waited inside, his bronze scales glowing faintly with heat. He did not bother with greetings. You will begin with terrain navigation, he said. Maintain car readiness at all times. If you cannot strike and move simultaneously, you have already failed. He launched into a demonstration, vaulting from platform to platform, staff slashing in precise arcs as the ground shifted beneath him. When he landed, stone cracked under the weight of the impact. Your turn. The trainees surged forward in groups. Lauren paced herself, breathing deliberately before stepping onto the first unstable platform. It dipped instantly under her weight. She adjusted, spreading her center of mass through instinct and repeating the micro-movements she had practiced in her quarters. Don't force the platform, she reminded herself. Flow with it. Her first jump landed solid. The second nearly sent her over the edge, but she redirected with the staff the way Xander taught her, using momentum rather than muscle. Razik spotted the adjustment and gave a curt nod. Not approval. Not yet. But recognition. Then the drills intensified. Simulated hazards flickered. Falling rocks, bursts of heat, target drones soaring past on erratic paths. Trainees bellowed battle cries as they struck moving targets. Lauren didn't have the lungs to roar, but she had precision. She let her smaller frame slip between beams where draconians had to duck. She used short, compact staff strikes instead of big sweeps that would unbalance her. Her ankle throbbed, but didn't fail her. And then she started to feel it, eyes watching her. Not the trainees, not Razik, the cubs. Their excited chatter carried across the yard, even through the barrier. She didn't understand the words until her translator caught up, stitching fragments into meaning. Look, she moved like she dodged, did you see? Humans can do that. She's so small. Do you think she'll fall? No, she's fast. The distraction nearly cost her. She stepped onto a platform just as it snapped downward. A spike of fire shot through her ankle. Don't collapse. Don't show it. She bent her knees, absorbed the shock, and willed herself through the next movement. The cubs squealed in excitement. Razik lifted a hand. Switched to paired combat. Lauren swallowed hard. Paired meant power versus power. Unless she could outthink whoever stood opposite her. Razik pointed. Kira, human, to the upper platform. Kira approached with her staff already spinning in a warm-up arc. Her pale gold scales reflected the arena's harsh light. She didn't look hostile, but she didn't look gentle either. I will not hold back, Kira said. Good, Lauren replied. I need the practice. They stepped onto the raised stone platform. Heat radiated upward. The ground trembled slightly as mechanics shifted below. Begin. Kira struck first. No hesitation, a downward diagonal meant to test strength. Lauren slid aside, letting the car skim her shoulder. The impact jolted her arm, but she held her grip. The next blow came faster. Lauren parried, redirecting instead of blocking. She used short pivots to conserve energy. Kira's eyes narrowed, not with anger, but interest. Lauren struck low. Kira countered high. They rotated around the platform in a dance of motion and instinct. Sweat dripped into Lauren's eyes, and her breathing turned ragged in the heavy air. But she stayed upright, stayed moving, stayed thinking. Razik eventually called it off. Acceptable adaptation, he said. And from him, that was almost a compliment. Lauren stepped off the platform, lungs burning, vision fuzzing slightly at the edges. But she stayed on her feet. She didn't notice the chaos on the observation platform until Razak scowled sharply. A crowd of cubs pressed against the retracting barrier. Their caretaker struggled to maintain order, but the barrier was sliding open for the scheduled meet and observe period, and the cubs had lost all sense of restraint. They spotted her, every single one, and then they charged. Razak barked, "Hold position!" But the cubs ignored him completely. Their small claws clicked rapidly on the stone as they sprinted straight past the Draconian trainees, straight past Razak, straight toward Lauren. She froze. 20 brightly scaled mini-dragons swarmed around her, staring up at her with enormous, shining eyes full of awe and questions that tripped over one another in high-pitched chaos. Is her hair soft? Why is she warm? She moves differently. Human, can you breathe fire? Do humans have tails? Can I touch your hand? Lauren stood completely still, hands raised slightly, as if surrounded by energetic puppies with claws. Cubs, the caretaker cried. Return at once. They did not. They crowded closer, utterly fearless. One tugged gently at Lauren's sleeve. Another poked her boot with a fascinated chirp. A third tried to peer into her cooling vents. Lauren slowly crouched to avoid towering over them. It's okay, she said quietly, though she doubted they understood English. Her translator buzzed with effort. One at a time. Their excitement doubled. Razak strode toward them, about to intervene, when a commanding voice cut through the air like a seismic wave. Let them. Every Draconian froze. High Commander Thorn walked into the arena with Master Sergeant Saren at his side, his presence shifting the air itself. The cubs paused long enough to blink up at him, then immediately returned to crowding around Lauren. Thorn watched the scene with unreadable intensity. This, he said to the trainees, is why she is here. He approached Lauren directly. She straightened as best she could while surrounded by miniature dragons. A small cub tugged her sleeve again. Can you lift me? He asked wide-eyed. Gasps erupted from caretakers and trainees alike. Cub handling was sacred. Formal. Regulated. Thorn made a small gesture. Respond as a human would. Lauren knelt and met the cub's gaze. What's your name? Vex. Okay, Vex. Hold still. She lifted him carefully. He was heavier than he looked, solid muscle wrapped in developing scales. But he relaxed in her grip, claws resting lightly on her shoulders. You're warm, he whispered. And soft. The other cubs squealed in jealousy. Thorn spoke again, voice controlled but strong. Curiosity is wisdom's first step. These cubs show what many adults have forgotten. That difference is not danger. It is possibility. The trainees stood motionless, taking in his words. For 15 minutes, Lauren answered questions, let cubs touch her gloves or hair, and even lifted 2 more, carefully, slowly, arm muscles trembling from exhaustion. Kira watched from short distance. Expression softened with something Lauren couldn't identify. When the cubs were finally herded away, they waved at her like old friends. Razak resumed training. Kira approached. You made an impression, she said. I didn't plan to, Lauren replied. That is why it matters, Kira answered. Training resumed, but something had shifted in the air. Something subtle, unspoken, but real. By the time the day ended and Saren approached her with a new direct order, Lauren felt it deep in her bones. This wasn't just training anymore. This was transformation. Saren's voice was low. High Commander Thorn requests your presence. Now, Lauren followed, heart pounding. Whatever came next would change her future, and maybe the Academy's, forever. Master Sergeant Saren didn't slow her stride as she led Lauren across the Academy's inner courtyards. Evening draped Draconus Prime in deep red light, turning every polished surface into a mirror of molten glass. Lauren followed, breathing hard, her suit's cooling mesh struggling against the rising heat radiating from the stone itself. Her ankle throbbed in a steady, nagging pulse, but she forced her steps to remain even. Saren finally stopped before a pair of towering doors carved with flowing lines that resembled both battle scars and ceremonial honors. The markings were ancient, older than most Draconian cities. Lauren's translator flickered as it attempted to interpret them. Valor, endurance, sacrifice, leadership. High Commander Thorn awaits inside, Saren said. And without another word, she turned and strode away. Lauren inhaled slowly. Then she placed her hand on the door panel. The heavy stone slabs parted with a grinding echo, and she stepped into a vast chamber filled with relics of wars long past. Weapons hung from the walls. Massive blades, shattered gauntlets, scorched armor plates, even a car that had been cracked clean through the middle. Floating holographic displays cast shifting light across the space. Near the enormous window that overlooked the entire academy stood Thorn. His silhouette was carved against the glowing horizon like a statue. Lauren approached with controlled precision and saluted. Reporting as ordered. High Commander. Thorn didn't move at first. His voice, when it came, seemed woven into the room's stone. 2 days, he said. 2 days, and already the academy trembles. Lauren kept her expression neutral, even as her pulse picked up. Sir. He turned, his molten red eyes narrowing slightly. You have disrupted traditional routines, confused instructors, captivated cubs. You have forced reconsideration among trainees who have never questioned a single doctrine. Lauren waited. His tone carried no anger, only analysis. You are not meant to merely endure training, Thorn continued. Your presence tests whether we can adapt, whether we can learn from what we do not expect. He gestured toward a floating hollow display that flickered to life. Scenes from New Appalachia illuminated the space. Miners building barricades of scrap metal, humans dragging cables through tunnels, makeshift vibration cannons firing into the hive swarms. You fought the Vrex in ways we never would have imagined, he said. Your species did not rely on uniformity or ritual. You did not wait for perfect formation. You created chaos, then weaponized it. He tapped the display, switching to Imperial battle footage. Draconian lines marched with impeccable precision. Stance, strike, shield, advance. 3,000 years of refinement, Thorn said. Entire civilizations conquered, protected, uplifted. But against the Vrex, this becomes a weakness. They evolve faster than our patterns. Lauren exhaled slowly. You believe humans can help you break those patterns. I know you can, Thorn replied. The question is whether our academy can tolerate it. He reached into a compartment beside him and retrieved a sleek data device. He offered it to her. Lauren accepted it carefully. This contains modified training protocols, Thorn explained. Developed by Archivist Xander and approved by me. Hybrid forms, your human adaptations merged with draconian fundamentals. Lauren scrolled through the display. The models showed movements she had already begun to explore, but refined, smoother, optimized for a body like hers operating in draconian conditions. These are brilliant, she whispered before she could stop herself. Thorn's expression flickered with feigned amusement. You will begin training with them tomorrow, he said. Instructors will not interfere. Trainees may observe. Those who show adaptability may join you. The weight of what he was proposing settled on her shoulders like a new kind of armor. I will not fail you, she said. Thorn stepped closer, towering over her. You misunderstand. You cannot fail me. If you collapse, bleed, break, none of that matters. What matters is this, that they see you try. That they witness a being with no natural advantages walk into the fire willingly. His voice dropped to a low rumble. The Vrex threat is spreading, and discipline without adaptation will doom us. Lauren felt the truth of it in her bones. She saluted again, and he returned the gesture with perfect formality. Go to Xander, he instructed. He will finalize your treatment. You cannot train if you cannot walk. Lauren left the chamber with her heartbeat shaking through her ribs. The corridors outside felt different now, not just stone and heat, but possibility. When she reached Xander's lab, the strange archivist was already waiting, a glowing device in his hands. Excellent, he chirped. You are precisely on schedule. Biological recovery threshold at 87%. Acceptable for continued function. He strapped the new device around her ankle with gentle precision. This will stabilize your joint during extended impact, he said. You will hardly notice it unless you attempt something foolish. Lauren arched an eyebrow. Define foolish. Anything Razik would define as normal, Xander said blandly. She laughed, just once because laughing hurt after the day she'd had. Before she left, he grew unexpectedly serious. High Commander Thorne rarely shares his long-term strategies, he said. If he has confided in you, it means he sees far ahead, farther than most. That may place you in a position of significance. Or danger, Lauren said softly. Xander tilted his head. Those are often the same thing. She returned to her quarters utterly exhausted, but her mind buzzed for hours. When sleep finally claimed her, it was with the image of hybrid forms spinning through her thoughts like constellations waiting to be drawn. The next morning struck like a hammer. Lauren woke before the bell and immediately began reviewing the modified forms from Thorne's data device. Her muscles protested, but she pushed through warm-up drills, recalibrating her body into the new flow. When she arrived at the assembly yard, Saren didn't make her join the normal ranks. Instead, she pointed her toward a smaller arena to the side. Your training diverges today, Saren said. Razik has been informed. Lauren nodded and entered the smaller arena. The space felt almost intimate compared to the main yard. Flat stone, several training dummies, adjustable platforms, and enough scorch marks to tell her others had bled and sweat here before her. She began slowly, working through the first hybrid sequence. It felt smoother than expected. Each strike required less brute force and more technique. Her body found a rhythm. Short steps, quick pivots, angled deflections controlled momentum. When she finished the first full sequence, she realized she wasn't alone. Kira stood at the edge of the arena, arms crossed, watching with sharp curiosity. Behind her were 3 more trainees from Cadre 5. They didn't speak. They just watched. Lauren swallowed and reset her stance. You may observe, she said carefully, but these aren't official forms yet. Kira stepped closer. May I see them again? Slowly, Lauren demonstrated. Her movements weren't perfect, but they carried intent. Kira nodded thoughtfully. That deflection requires far less arm strength than the traditional version, Kira observed. Interesting. She attempted the movement herself. It took her only 3 tries to mimic it with near-perfect precision. 2 more trainees followed, testing the adjustments, comparing them to the standard forms they'd learned since childhood. Lauren watched them try the movements she had learned only yesterday. It felt surreal. When Razik entered the arena a short while later, Lauren braced for criticism or in order to clear out the spectators. Instead, Razik stood silently in the doorway and watched his trainees experiment with the hybrid forms. When Kira attempted a sequence with small errors in foot placement, Razik corrected her, not to steer her back to tradition, but to refine the new motion. Lauren's breath caught. This was the beginning of acceptance. Not approval, not admiration, but willingness to adapt. By midday, nearly 10 trainees had drifted in during their breaks, drawn by murmurs spreading across the academy. Some watched silently. Others asked questions openly. Why step this way? What advantage does this angle give? How does a human generate momentum without muscle mass? Razik didn't chase them out. Kira even smiled once, a small, rare curving of the lips that meant far more in draconian culture than in human. When the bell finally sounded, signaling return to standard drills, Kira lingered a moment. Your forms challenge assumptions, she said. I intend to request permission to train with you officially. Lauren nodded, stunned and grateful. The afternoon passed in a blur of standard drills. Lauren performed better than any previous day, her movements tighter, her balance steadier. Even her ankle felt nearly whole again. By evening meal, whispers buzzed across the dining hall. Trainees who usually ignored her now glanced her way. Not all kindly, but not all dismissively either. Progress. As she carried her food tray to an isolated corner, she noticed Saren approaching. The entire hall quieted. Saren stopped beside her table, expression unreadable. You have caused a disturbance, she said. Lauren's pulse spiked. Not a negative one, Saren continued after a beat, but a disturbance. The instructors debate your methods. Some fear they undermine tradition. Others argue they strengthen it. Lauren set her jaw. I'm not trying to change your culture, only my survival odds. Saren's eyes narrowed slightly, assessing her. Tomorrow, Saren said, you will face the first challenge. Lauren froze. She had read about the Academy's challenges, milestone tests that evaluated progress through combat trials. They weren't lethal, but they weren't gentle either. Will I follow the same rules as Draconian trainees? Lauren asked. With one exception, Saren replied. High Commander Thorn has authorized you to use any technique, traditional or hybrid. That was unheard of. Rest, Saren said. Tomorrow, you will be observed closely. She strode off, leaving Lauren with a tray of untouched food and a heart pounding like a war drum. Lauren intended to head straight to her quarters to review the challenge procedures, but her data tablet flashed with a message from Xander. Come immediately. Bring your ankle. Also your brain. Important. Lauren sighed. Of course. She found the archivist's lab even messier than before. And standing beside Xander, tail twitching, eyes glowing, scales bright as sunlight, was Vex. Human Lauren. Vex chirped, bolting toward her. You're here. Lauren blinked. Vex, what are you doing in the research wing? He insisted, Xander said dryly. Apparently, meeting you once was insufficient stimulation for his developing psyche. His caretakers suggested a supervised visit. I agreed. Regret is pending. Vex puffed out his chest proudly and held up a small data tablet. I made something for you. He tapped the display. A crude drawing appeared. Lauren holding him with the other cubs around them, rendered in chaotic strokes of neon color. Lauren's throat tightened unexpectedly. Vex, it's beautiful. Thank you. Vex preened at the praise. Then his expression shifted. Archivist Xander said you have to do a challenge tomorrow. Will you be hurt? I don't want you hurt. Lauren crouched. I'll be okay. I'll do my best. Xander stepped forward, offering a new device, sleek, silver, and humming with energy. This is a biomonitor calibrated to human physiology, he explained. It will track your vital signs during the challenge. It also contains an emergency stabilization field that activates during severe trauma. Lauren's eyebrows rose. Is that allowed? Technically, Xander said, it is categorized as a research tool, therefore not forbidden. Vex beamed. I helped. Lauren fastened the device around her arm. Thank you. Both of you. Vex leaned closer. Will you win? Lauren hesitated because honesty mattered, especially to a child. I don't know if I'll win, she said, but I will fight with everything I have. Vex nodded solemnly, as if she had just declared a sacred oath. Then you'll win, he said confidently, because humans don't stop. That simple faith hit harder than any blow from Razzik's staff. Once Vex was escorted away, Xander grew serious. You will be fighting an opponent of instructor rank, he said. Lauren's blood ran cold. Razzik, Xander nodded once. He will not go easy on you, Xander warned. But unpredictability is your strength. Use it. Adapt. Be everything he does not expect. Lauren left the lab knowing this truth deep in her bones. Tomorrow would not just be a challenge. It would be a declaration, a test of whether a human belonged in the Empire's oldest warrior academy. And with Vex drawing tucked in her pack and Thorn's hybrid forms burned in her mind, she felt, for the first time, that she might just be ready. Morning broke over Draconus Prime with a ferocity that matched the tension in Lauren's chest. Crimson sunlight spilled across the Academy's black stone courtyards like molten metal, casting razor-sharp shadows that cut through the rising heat. Lauren stood in the preparation chamber adjacent to the challenge arena, her suit's cooling system already humming at its highest safe setting. Today was the first challenge, her first formal test, her first public risk, and her opponent was Instructor Razzik. The knowledge sat heavily in her stomach. Razzik wasn't merely strong. He was precise, disciplined, and utterly unforgiving. His strikes carried the kind of trained violence that came only from decades in the Imperial Guard. Facing him wasn't just daunting, it bordered on suicidal for a human body. But unpredictability was her weapon. Adaptation was her shield. And failure Failure would confirm every draconian belief that humans were soft, fragile, unworthy. Lauren rolled her shoulders, grounding herself. Her biomonitor glowed faintly on her arm. Xander's device, calibrated with Vex help. It would protect her only if she came within a breath of catastrophic injury. Everything else was on her. Saren stepped into the chamber without warning, as sharp and composed as ever. "You will enter the arena when called," she said. "Do not bow. Do not initiate greeting. Your stance will speak for you." Lauren nodded, gripping her car. "Understood." Saren's gaze lingered on her, measuring something, resolve, maybe, or the line between courage and recklessness. "Remember," Saren said quietly, "Razik is evaluating your adaptability, not your strength. He will strike hard, but not with intent to kill. Do not assume mercy beyond that." A bitter laugh almost slipped out of Lauren. "Wasn't planning to." Saren made no comment. Instead, she asked, "Are you prepared?" Lauren considered the question. Her muscles ached from 3 days of relentless training. Her ankle, though mostly healed, still throbbed occasionally. Sweat beaded along her hairline despite the cooling mesh in her suit. The gravity felt heavier today, psychological or not. "Yes," she said, and she meant it. The challenge bell sounded in the distance, its booming tone vibrating through the walls. Saren stepped aside. "Enter." Lauren inhaled deeply and walked toward the arena. The challenge arena was unlike any space she'd trained in. Circular, massive, surrounded by tiered stone platforms where instructors, trainees, and even a few high-ranking officials had gathered. The stands were buzzing with low, rumbling conversation. As Lauren stepped onto the arena floor, every voice quieted. Dozens of draconian eyes turned toward her, unreadable and intense. Their bodies towered over the railings, scales gleaming in the reddish light, claws hooked casually over stone. Their posture was relaxed, but their curiosity crackled in the air like static. Kira stood among Cadre 5, her posture stiff with concern. Vex and a few cubs had somehow convinced their caretakers to let them attend. They peered eagerly over the edge, little tails flicking with excitement. Xander perched in a high alcove, surrounded by instruments already monitoring her biometrics. And then Razik entered. His footsteps echoed like distant thunder. The instructor's bronze scales shimmered, his black markings stark like battle scars painted by fire. When he planted his car into the arena floor, the impact reverberated through Lauren's bones. Razik bowed toward the stands, then turned to face her. Lauren didn't bow. She planted her feet, raised her staff, and assumed the hybrid readiness stance Xander had refined for her. A ripple swept through the crowd. Surprise, maybe even disapproval. Razik's eyes narrowed slightly. Unorthodox. Lauren kept her voice steady. Effective. He didn't dispute it. Saren stepped into the center of the arena. This challenge tests adaptability, endurance, and combat reasoning. Use of full-strength blows is prohibited, but no technique is barred. Contest ends when one combatant is incapacitated, disarmed, or yields. She looked at each of them. "Begin." Razik didn't move immediately. He watched her the way a predator watches prey, calculating, waiting for weakness. Lauren didn't move either. She let silence sharpen her senses. Then Razik struck. He lunged with speed that defied his size, car slicing through the air in a horizontal arc that would have shattered her ribs. Lauren pivoted sideways, letting the swing pass inches from her torso. She redirected the momentum with a light tap of her staff, using his own force to send him a fraction off balance. It didn't last. Razik recovered instantly. He brought his staff down in a vertical chop. Lauren rolled aside, the impact cracking the stone where she'd stood a heartbeat earlier. The crowd reacted with a low rumble, surprised murmurs at her evasion. Razik spun, sweeping low. Lauren jumped, landing hard but upright. Her ankle protested, but the brace absorbed most of the shock. "You moved differently," Razik said between strikes. "Not like prey." Lauren parried, redirecting his blow rather than absorbing it. "Good. I'd hate to be predictable." He gave no verbal response, but his attacks shifted, not slower, but more probing. He tested her angles, her reactions, her weaknesses. Lauren countered as best she could, using every hybrid technique she practiced. Small steps, tight pivots, angle parries. Never meeting force directly. Never staying still long enough for strength to matter. But Razik was relentless. He pushed her, pressed her, drove her backward across the arena. Her lungs burned. Her calves trembled. Sweat slicked her palms despite the suit's grip mesh. He was testing her limits and finding them. When he feinted left and swung right, she barely dodged. When he thrust forward in a spear-like jab, she twisted just in time. Her arm vibrated painfully when she knocked aside one particularly heavy strike. Her staff cracked under the strain. Just a hairline fracture, but she felt it. Razik noticed. Of course he did. He advanced faster. Lauren's breath stuttered. She swung out of desperation, hoping to buy space, but Razik knocked her staff aside effortlessly, his strength overwhelming her leverage. The shock rattled her bones. She stumbled. He stepped in, and for a heartbeat, the crowd leaned forward. Razik brought his car down in a decisive arc. Not lethal, but decisive. Lauren had one choice. She didn't block. She didn't counter. She dropped. She dropped entirely, falling flat, letting his strike whistle through the space where her head had been. The move was inelegant, undignified, completely un-Draconian, which is why it worked. Razik was forced to step forward to avoid overbalancing. Lauren swept her leg sideways, catching his ankle. It barely budged, but it was enough. His stance faltered. Lauren surged upward, planting her staff against his knee and using her entire body's weight to lever upward. The crowd gasped. Razik stumbled. Not far, but enough. Enough for her to pivot behind him and bring her fractured car to his back in a symbolic strike position. It wouldn't hurt him. It wouldn't overpower him. But it meant she had him, technically, symbolically, at disadvantage. The arena froze. Razik straightened slowly, his breath rumbling in his chest. Lauren lowered her staff and stepped back, giving him space. He turned to face her, and for the first time, something softened in his expression. Respect in the smallest possible dose. Saren entered the arena. The challenge ends, she declared. Result, draw. A draw. Against a Draconian instructor. Against Razik. The crowd erupted, not in cheers, but in shocked discussion that rolled through the arena like a seismic wave. Vex shrieked with happiness from the stands. Kira's eyes widened in something close to admiration. Xander clapped once, loud enough for everyone to hear. Razik approached Lauren. She braced instinctively, unsure of what he would say. He spoke quietly. You did not defeat me, he said. Lauren nodded. I know, but, Razik continued, I did not defeat you. A beat. Then he extended one clawed hand, a gesture of profound respect in Draconian culture. You fought as yourself, not as a poor imitation of us, he said. That is why you stand. Lauren placed her hand against his forearm, the only correct response. Thank you, instructor. Razik stepped back and addressed the trainees. Observe this outcome, he commanded. Strength alone did not prevail. Nor form, nor tradition. Adaptation, he looked directly at Lauren, is a weapon. A ripple of murmured acknowledgement spread through the crowd. Lauren felt something shift around her, subtle but powerful. Not acceptance, not yet, but openness. A new path forming beneath her feet. As she left the arena, ankle throbbing but heart steady, Kira intercepted her. That was Kira's search for the right word. Instructive. Lauren laughed breathlessly. For me too. You showed them something they couldn't ignore, Kira said. Tomorrow, many will try those movements themselves. Lauren smiled faintly. Good. They're not just for humans. Kira tilted her head. No, they are for warriors. Saren approached then, expression unreadable but voice softer than before. Rest, she said. The academy shifts now. You will need strength for what comes next. Lauren nodded and started toward her quarters, body aching but spirit blazing. She had survived the first challenge. She had earned a draw. She had shown the Academy a glimpse of what Thorn hoped for. And for the first time, she felt the tide turning, not just for her, but for the culture that had believed humans could never stand among them. Tomorrow, training would begin again. Harder, longer, with more eyes watching. But tonight, she allowed herself a moment of something rare. Hope. The weeks following the first challenge altered the Academy more profoundly than any structural renovation or ceremonial decree could have. The ripple began quietly. Just a shift in posture when Lauren entered a training hall, a softening in the eyes of instructors who had once dismissed her, a curious tilt of heads from trainees who previously pretended she wasn't worth acknowledging. By the end of the second week, those subtle ripples had become open currents of interest. Trainees from other cadres began appearing on the edges of the smaller arena where she trained, watching as she moved through the hybrid forms Thorn and Xander had designed. Some tried to imitate the movements from memory. Some attempted to adapt them immediately. By the end of the third week, Razik himself stood among the observers, silent and intensely focused, occasionally making a low sound of approval when Lauren demonstrated a technique that impressed him. And by the end of the second month, the Academy had quietly accepted something it would have once declared impossible. A human was influencing their combat doctrine. Every morning, Lauren woke before dawn, muscles still sore from the previous day's drills. She trained alone first, sharpening footwork, refining transitions, recalibrating movements that felt inefficient in Draconus gravity. Then Kira arrived, punctual as a chronometer, her curiosity now complemented by genuine respect. She practiced the hybrid forms with Lauren as naturally as she had once practiced the traditional ones, her fluid precision offering insights Lauren could adapt in return. Soon, others joined. 2 trainees at first, then 5, then nearly half of Cadre 5. Razik eventually formalized these sessions into a recognized training block the Academy referred to simply as alternative tactical adaptation. It was, Lauren realized, a historical shift disguised in painfully dull, bureaucratic terminology. But in the Empire, change often arrived wrapped in harmless words to make it easier for tradition to accept. Even Saren, who had once regarded Lauren with suspicion, began stopping by the arena. She said little, but she observed everything. And when she finally asked Lauren to demonstrate a human feint reflex, the request carried more weight than a speech of praise. Amid all this, Vex visited whenever his caretakers allowed. He and his clutch mates watched training sessions from the observation deck, cheering loudly whenever Lauren performed a move they recognized. Sometimes, after the day's drills ended, Vex ran across the arena floor with sketches he had made, bright, scribbled portraits of humans and Draconians fighting side by side. Lauren kept everyone. As the Academy adapted, a quiet urgency underpinned everything. The Vrex threat loomed like a storm gathering beyond the horizon, felt long before it was seen. Reports arrived from outlying sectors describing lost scouts, missing colonies, heat signatures clustering in patterns too deliberate to be coincidence. Thorn monitored these reports closely. He rarely appeared during training, but when he did, the instructors straightened, trainees snapped into flawless posture, and even the air seemed to tighten. One evening, as the Academy lights dimmed to simulate dusk, Thorn summoned Lauren to his study. She expected another strategy session or a progress review. Instead, he spoke without preamble. The Vrex have begun large-scale mobilization in the Yareth corridor, he said. The Empire will answer. Lauren's pulse quickened. When does the counteroffensive begin? Soon, Thorn replied. But not before we finalize a new combat formation, one incorporating hybrid techniques. Their effectiveness must be demonstrated in the field. It took her a moment to register what he meant. You want me to fight, she said. I want you to lead, Thorn corrected. The words landed like a physical weight. Leadership here did not mean a ceremonial role or symbolic presence. It meant frontline combat. It meant responsibility. It meant risk on a level the Academy drills could not prepare her for. It will be a mixed operational strike team, Thorn continued. Draconians trained in traditional doctrine, others trained in hybrid methods. And you, providing the adaptation that our enemy has not yet accounted for. Lauren steadied her breathing. I'll go. Thorn nodded once, as if her acceptance had never been in doubt. You will choose your trainees, he said. Select only those who show both skill and flexibility. We cannot afford rigid thinking in this engagement. Lauren knew immediately who she would pick. Kira, whose precision made her deadly. Rask, a copper-scaled trainee whose speed complemented hybrid forms perfectly. Tovin, a strategist with exceptional pattern recognition. 3 more trainees from Cadre 5, whose adaptability had impressed her. The team assembled within days. Their training intensified beyond anything Lauren had experienced. She worked alongside them, pushing herself harder than she believed possible, sparring until her arms trembled and her lungs burned in the scorching Draconus heat. Saren supervised portions of these sessions, occasionally offering corrections that made Lauren's movements sharper. Razik drilled the team in unpredictable terrain dynamics. Xander refined their biomonitors and provided rapid response medical protocols. By the time orders arrived, they were not merely a team. They were a unit, a hybrid formation the Empire had never fielded before. When a strike cruiser finally launched, the Academy gathered to see them off. Draconian warriors in traditional armor stood shoulder to shoulder with trainees bearing newer, more versatile gear. The Cubs watched from the front row, Vex waving both arms wildly as Lauren passed. His voice echoed across the departure platform. Come back strong, human Lauren. She smiled despite the tension in her chest. That's the plan, Vex. The Vex warfront was worse than she imagined. The hive ships were towering, organic monstrosities, pulsing with sickly bioluminescence. Their swarms clouded the void, moving in synchronized patterns that shifted too quickly for standard draconian formations to counter. In the initial hours of the battle, Lauren understood immediately why the Empire had struggled. The draconian lines were disciplined, perfect in their structure, but predictable. The Vex exploited that predictability with brutal efficiency. But the hybrid unit was different. They moved erratically, unpredictably, breaking patterns in ways that disrupted Vex targeting algorithms. Lauren led from the center, calling rapid directional changes, weaving through enemy fire with movements the Vex could not map. Her team adapted on the fly, using unorthodox angles, unexpected feints, and deliberately irregular spacing. The Vex hesitated, just for seconds at a time, but those seconds were everything. The hybrid unit punched a hole through the Vex formation and reached the central command node, a grotesque living construct that pulsed as if it breathed. Destroying it required precision strikes from inside its defensive perimeter. Lauren ordered her team into the breach. Alarm screamed. Gravity fluctuated. Heat surged. Screens flickered with bioorganic interference. And yet her team held. Kira carved open critical neural conduits. Rask disrupted psionic links with rapid sequence shocks. Tovin coordinated the final strike pattern. Lauren delivered the disabling blow, driving her weapon into the node's core at the precise moment its defenses collapsed. The Vex swarms convulsed, then broke apart, their coordination severed. Across 3 sectors, the Vex offensive failed. The battle ended, but the significance had only begun. When Lauren returned to Draconus Prime, the Academy wasn't just waiting, it was transformed. Draconians lined the courtyard, warriors and trainees alike standing in ranks not out of protocol, but respect. Kira greeted her with a firm forearm clasp. Razik bowed, a gesture so rare it drew murmurs. Saren met her eyes with something close to pride. Vex sprinted across the courtyard before the caretakers could stop him and threw his arms around Lauren with unrestrained joy. You came back strong, he shouted. Lauren laughed, lifting him easily. I had good training. Later that cycle, the Emperor held a formal ceremony. Towering, ancient, and draped in ceremonial armor, he regarded Lauren with a gaze that felt like judgment and approval blended into one. In 3 millennia, the Emperor proclaimed, the Empire has stood unchallenged. But strength without adaptation is fragility in disguise. Today, we recognize that growth comes not only from power, but from openness to the unfamiliar. He held out a medallion forged of black and crimson metal. The Imperial Battle Medallion, he declared, awarded to Lauren Hayes of Earth. The hall erupted with a resonant thunder of draconian approval. As she stepped back from the dais, Lauren spotted Vex standing proudly beside his clutch mates, wearing a new training sash, the kind reserved for younglings admitted into the pre-academy program. He waved energetically. "Human Lauren, I got accepted. I'll train like you did." Her chest tightened with a warmth that felt deeper than pride. His future, and the future of many like him, would be shaped by unity, not division. That night, as the Academy's lights dimmed and the crimson glow of Draconus Prime filtered through her window, Lauren stood alone in the courtyard. She looked up at the towering architecture, then at the distant stars where the Vrex regrouped. The galaxy was still dangerous, still unpredictable, still full of threats no single species could face alone. But now there was a path forward, because one human had walked through Academy gates that were never meant for her and refused to break. And tomorrow, more would follow, because change had begun the day a human entered training, and all the dragon cubs broke rank to run toward her.